Welcome. We are broadcasting live from the mothership. You are tuned in and listening to Starseed Energy Radio with your host Jonah Bolt. Starseed Energy Radio, where you can always tune in to hear the colors and see the music. Starseed Energy Radio goes live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, what is up, Spaceship Earth? Thanks for tuning in. You are now receiving a live transmission from Starseed Radio, where you can always tune in to hear the colors and see the music. I'm your host, Jonah Bolt, the Octorian Starseed. Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2015. We have an awesome show lined up for you today. We have three guests. Ryan Matthew Durnick with the Daily Download. Then we're going to be joined by Edward Twitchell Hall III. And then our main featured guest will be Andy Hoffman, Ranting Andy from the MilesFranklin.com, a gold and precious metals specialist. Andy's been on the show before. We're going to talk about the craziness that's happening this week in the markets and all over the world. And Andy is the best person I could have think of to bring on to explain what is happening and what it means. So that will be on the second half of the show. With that, we're going to get started with our daily quote. It goes like this. Arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. That quote, our good friend and our boy, Edward Snowden. Love that guy. Again, arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. With that, we're going to get started with the Daily Download. We're joined by Ryan Matthew Durnick from Bell.com. Good morning, Ryan. How are you today?
Very well, Jonah. How you doing?
Doing good, doing good. It's hump day, midweek. Lots of things happening, lots of news to cover. So let's go into the Daily Download. What is happening on Mother Gaia today?
On Mother Gaia, in regards to solar activity, behemoth sunspot AR2403 started to decay yesterday, but it's still dangerous and active region. The sunspot has Delta-class magnetic fields and harboring energy for strong solar flares. NOAA forecasters are estimating a 60% chance of an N-class flare and a 10% chance of X flares. In other news, there was an earthquake yesterday in the type magnitude, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because you got to think about the New Madrid seismic zone there, and the fact that this either it was A, related to a fracking operation, or B, it could be a foreshock to a larger event. So it was felt throughout much of the area of western Tennessee and parts of Arkansas. And in regards to other seismic activity, notable seismic activity, well, I'll just cover the 5.0 or greater. There was a 5.7, 115 kilometers southeast of Skull Island in South Georgia, the island South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. And aside from that, there was only a 5.0 magnitude earthquake north of Ascension Island, and then a 5.3 magnitude earthquake.
Ascension Island, I like that. Ascension Island.
Yes, and that's what we all try to do, is ascend to a higher plane of consciousness. 5.3 magnitude was 29 kilometers east-southeast of Takanabe, Japan. And on to other news, as we were following earlier over the weekend and preceding last weekend, the tensions have relaxed in regards to North Korea and South Korea. North Korea has apologized for the provocations, and South Korea has conceded and said it will no longer push out any North Korea anti-propagandas and information. And on to tropical weather. We have a lot going on. Tropical storm Erica.
I think Ryan cut out for a minute. Ryan, are you with us? All right, we'll jump into some...
I'm sorry.
There we go.
There we go. I cut out for a second. There's a thunderstorm in the area. At 11 a.m., advisory on tropical storm Erica. It has it positioned at about 16.1 north, 57.6 west. Movement is west currently at about 17 miles an hour, so it's a pretty good clip. And the pressure is down to 1,005 millibars. Computer models have it moving north through the northern Leeward Islands as tropical storm watches. Probably warnings will be issued later today as it's moving at a pretty good clip. And then it's moving along the northern coast of Puerto Rico, the north coast of Dominican Republic, and then by Friday, and then by about I'd say on Sunday it's going to be in the central Bahamas, and then by Monday it shows it as a Category 1 hurricane, forward at anywhere from 95 mile an hour winds, and it would be coming ashore. It looks like between West Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale. Again, this is still subject to change.
That's right where I'm supposed to fly home this weekend, Ryan. Maybe I shouldn't leave Costa Rica and go to Florida. What do you think?
Not yet. But in regards, it's still we have to keep watch on this. And then in the Pacific, there is a possibility that they've had some near misses throughout the summer. In Hawaii, Tropical Storm Ignacio is really increasing in intensity quickly. It has winds of 55 miles an hour. It's moving west at about 15 to 20 miles an hour. And the possibility is that now the Big Island of Hawaii is in the cone on Monday. So that possibility is there that it may affect the islands directly. Indirectly, if it doesn't hit the islands, there's going to be a lot of large surf, especially on the east-facing coastline of the Big Island. In regards to other news, we have resources falling short in regards to the wildfires currently going on in Washington State, and the wildfire has now grown to a historic monster. There's possibility it forms into a firestorm, basically, and there's about 150 firefighters from Pennsylvania that are transported over there battling the fire, and it's basically the number one priority right now is to quell this fire, which has only been 15% contained since August 15th. So in just 10 days, it's already cost nearly $10 million to battle this firefighter, according to the fire commanders in the area. And I've talked to people out in the western states, and they said that there's ash falling in Idaho. That's how intense these fires are in Washington State right now.
That's pretty far away.
It's pretty impressive. As we saw yesterday, on Monday, the stock market had a lot of volatility. Initially, it was down 1,000 points, rebounded a little bit, and had losses of about 535 points on the Dow Jones. Yesterday, it was up 300 points, then closed about 200 points down for the day, and now it's up 300 points. So it's a possibility it could go down, but there's also the likelihood that it will go into positive territory today and have some gains, slight gains, because of the interest rates being lowered in China, and that should show.
You mean they'll fix the numbers?
They'll fix the numbers.
I saw another article I want to mention to you. I don't know if you saw this, but the former UK government advisor put out some tweets over the last couple of days. Stock up on food and supplies to survive the market crash and ensuing social chaos.
I did
Interesting
see that.
article.
He said to stock up on a couple of weeks of supplies, at the very most a month, for you and your family and loved ones. And in regards to other news, Nepal has opened Everest to climbers for the first time since the earthquake in April. So this is good news in regards to tourism and such, because that's a big tourist boon for that area. And as we've been noting and covering over the last couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, you had the explosion in Tianjin, where over 100 people died in that disaster, and now there's fears of mass poisoning from sodium cyanide in the area, and so they have basically an area in diameter of 1.9 miles where it's restricted for certain personnel. Another explosion has occurred at a factory in Huantai Zibo, Shandong province, and luckily this was not as bad. The plant leaves 1 dead and 9 injured, but then go to Japan a couple of days ago, and a blast rocks a U.S. military warehouse. Luckily, no one was killed, but there is, again, I'm not going to go without a credible source, some speculation that these were staged to some degree. These attacks were staged, and I talked about that with you, Jonah, a couple days ago as well.
That was my initial reaction when we saw that explosion. My initial reaction was, come on, within a week, all these explosions, big explosions, almost the size of a nuclear weapon. I think it was something, that they're not telling us. It's a communist country. I'm sure they're not telling us. But yes, we've seen a few reports speculating that it was a space weapon, it was this, but, be open to it, because not everything is always what you seem.
Exactly. And then in other news, New Jersey is potentially looking at the possibility that they're overdue for an earthquake. Everywhere you hear, some location in the United States is overdue for their big earthquake. And the last time that New Jersey saw a big earthquake was a 5.3, and that occurred throughout Pennsylvania and New Hampshire in 1783. But again, this is before you have modern infrastructure like bridges to connect New Jersey, New York. So you can imagine these buildings and skyscrapers that are here now, they're not built earthquake ready. So it would be interesting and unfortunate if that does occur, but it's yet to remain to be seen. And on to other news, the mass exodus going on from Hungary into Hungary from European unions into the European Union as a whole, with predominantly Syrian refugees, are it's just mind-boggling. And
it's a disaster over in Syria. We know that. We
Oh my God.
We've been a major part of that chaos. So good work, U.S.
Exactly. ISIS. Thank you, ISIS. And in Germany, they expect to receive 800,000 refugees just this year. Chancellor Angela Merkel, she was heckled by dozens of protesters as she visited an eastern town where violent anti-refugee protests erupted. So this is just an ongoing situation. And again, we haven't seen immigration on a scale like this of migrants going over and fleeing a threat since the beginning of World War II. So I think
we talked about that like a month ago. It was like 60 million people have been displaced by war all over the world last year. I mean, it's unbelievable. Before we end the daily download round, I just want to mention an article, Government Intensifies Persecution of Gardeners in Attempt to Criminalize Self-Sufficiency. We've been talking about this for years. The government is really coming down on people growing their own food. It's crazy. This country was founded on farms, farming. I mean, we work with the natives on that. This is something that's embedded in our society, farming. And also a cool article, I don't know if you saw this, NASA astronauts to eat the first vegetables grown in space. I thought that was a cool article. NASA finally grew some vegetables up there. They ate the first vegetables, and that is pretty cool in my eyes. I'll post this article up on Starseed Radio. And I just wanted to mention one more. This article, commonly prescribed pharmaceuticals make people angry, violent, and more likely to kill, researchers discover. We've been talking about this. We know that.
Yeah.
Antidepressants.
SSRIs are the main reason. Yeah. SSRIs are the main reason. And MO for all of the mass shootings in the United States, if you look at the correlation.
And I had no idea that almost 70% of Americans are taking at least one prescription drug. That is out of control. Yes. And 50% are prescribed two or more. And we know these prescription drugs are not natural. They're chemicals. Oh, it's crazy statistics. I don't know that many Americans. 70% are taking it. Unbelievable.
It's mind-boggling. And basically going on last night, this will be the Game of Thrones individual of the day.
Yes.
It's Jorge Ramos, main news anchor at Univision and Fusion, when he tried to ask a question without being called on to Mr. Trump about immigration. Initially, Trump had his bodyguards remove the gentleman because he overstepped and didn't wait for his turn. Thereafter, they allowed him back in, and Trump discussed back and forth, tit for tat, about immigration. And he said he would remove illegal immigrants in a very humane way, and made the correlation that predominance of a lot of the crimes in large cities is directly subsequent of illegal immigration, which you can't deny. The fact that they traffic a lot of narcotics through our borders, they're porous. We need to increase security.
Sure.
And again, this is really why Trump has been a focal point, and he's really started to distance himself in the polls in regards to the other Republican candidates.
I'm gonna post a picture up too for our Game of Thrones person of the day, but also I'm gonna post a picture of Trump's clothing. If you've seen Trump attire, and if you look at the tag, it is made in Mexico. So Trump's own clothing line is made in Mexico. So I'm going to post that picture up. So exactly. So Trump can say all he wants. Why is his Trump attire clothing line made in Mexico? So awesome.
Workers get paid less.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Ryan, for the daily download. You can catch Ryan's information at bellwetherpost.com or on starseedradio.com. We have his Twitter feed up there as well as mine. Check that out for always the latest news and updates. Ryan, thank you for the daily download. And our Game of Thrones person of the day, one more time.
Jorge Ramos. Contesting Donald Trump on his immigration policies.
There you go. Awesome, Ryan. Thank you for that. Have a good day. We'll be with you tomorrow. Now we're going to bring in our special guest, not the main guest. That's Andy Hoffman. This is Edward Twitchell Hall III. He was on Monday. He's going to be on today and also on Friday because we really want to nail home this amazing event, Brenton Woods. BrentonWoodsIV.org is the website. Check it out. And it's an amazing event, historical event that's taking place. We're going to have him on all week to really talk about this, the meaning of it, and what's going on. So with that, Ted, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Yeah, wonderful, John. How are you? Great to
Doing
hear
good.
all that news and
Yes, the
fruit.
daily download. Awesome. So
Feels
tell
good
us
in my
about
belly.
tell us about this event, Ted. Up to date for any new listeners that don't know about it. A little history, if you will, please.
Yeah, so for those who weren't with us this last Monday, Bretton Woods is this very elite kind of gathering place where in 1945 or 1944, after World War II, the world leadership came together to stabilize the world market. And then that's when they basically fixed the numbers on the U.S. Dollar as the reserve note for the world. And since then, planet-wide debt-based financing has essentially impoverished the planet. And so these wonderful people who are just very old families of the Mayflower and the founding of the United States have been slowly building up their community of trust from civil rights activists who worked deeply with Martin Luther King, and they're coming together at the same location for the redemption of our financial system. And it's an open call, and the website is, again, it's Bretton Woods, BRETTON, WOODISIV.org, Bretton Woods 4. And it deals what this call is, and it's fundamentally coming at this from a from a sacred standpoint. But it's very much grounded in our rights, in our God-given rights, and also the rights that our Constitution recognizes. And those are our right to actually print and issue our currency. And right now our currency is presently at the dictates of a small group that is a dominating group of people that are not accountable whatsoever, and that's the Federal Reserve Bank, which is a private bank. So the Bretton Woods 4 gathering is actually it's a call to come together because of this power that we actually wield, and it's expressed in New Hampshire right now as a bill called Common Sense. And the Common Sense bill is reclaiming the state bank of New Hampshire, so that New Hampshire citizens are actually going to be in control of their state bank, that it won't have the FDIC fees, it won't require the same, even close to the same amount of executive pay. It'll be far more efficient, and it's based on the only publicly held bank in the country, which is North Dakota's bank, which is a hyper-efficient banking system because it's controlled by the state, and everybody inside of that office is accountable to the citizens, whereas we still, as a nation, can't even have failed to audit the Federal Reserve, because you audit private companies. We wouldn't have to audit a public office. So this is getting at the very root of the financial system, and it's right during the primaries. So that's sort of a good overview of it.
Now, Ted, this is basically a historic event taking place at where you said the dollar was, internationalized to the world. So it's a very critical place where this is happening at, carried out by people that have really deep roots in history of America, the Mayflower, and founding fathers. So how can people get involved? What can we do this week to support this event?
Well, the first thing is to know to even try to come and make it to this event. And there's that website actually has a list of couch surfing sites and everything. This is all done through sweat. Like, there's no real sponsors. It's all just regular Americans. Um, Again, like Martin Luther King's grandson, Gandhi's grandson, the former former central bankers who actually formed the base of the currency system in Europe that eventually was taken over and turned into the euro. These are just going into and meeting with these people. I highly recommend trying to make it out to New Hampshire. It's in September 29th to October 6th. The other way that people can get involved, besides just getting directly in touch with their the main organizers at that website, is with me, because the primary organizer, Stuart Weeks, asked me to help to coordinate public input to their meeting. So I'm trying to see if Luke Rudowski of We Are Change is able to video record, and that way we can actually have our voices heard a little bit through online websites. And I'm also organizing the New York City partner event, and between me and Stuart Weeks, the primary organizer, we can actually help people get their own companion gathering to come together. And there's a number of them all over the world already, like Australia to Romania. There are these companion events that are occurring. So anybody who wants to help, who knows, especially like the radio show, would be amazing. I think like just people getting in touch with me, besides getting online to brettonwoods4iv.org and getting in touch by email with them, you can get in touch with me at TEDWARDHALL, Tedward Hall, on Twitter. Also on Facebook, Jonah and I are connected. I'm Edward Hall on Facebook. And I think, Jonah, like, if anybody who gets in touch with you directly who wants to help, we should really talk about how to open the media on it, and like try to have recordings of the proceedings, and so basically it's an open field. Like, people can set up their own gathering in their own area. I'm helping administer the communications of like how do we actually have the input from other areas, like go directly into the live meeting at Bretton Woods, so people who are dedicated and have some expertise, like, it's up to them to make it what it can be.
Excellent. Amazing event. That's why we're having you on all week. So people, please check out the website, support it. And you also want to mention something else. There's a court case that you want to go into. We have about 4 minutes left. So what's happening with that?
Great. Well, just with this Bretton Woods gathering, we can see this is some superpower that Americans have and can actually wield of reclaiming our banks state by state. So when people say, "Oh, it's all screwed," and like we're going to have a terrible meltdown, like we actually can take back our banks. The North Dakota's bank didn't crash during the 2008 crash. So the other thing that's kind of the other piece is this thing called Flood Wall Street that occurred. One of my friends, Sandy, who is one of the other original organizers of Occupy, she called a very good group after the climate march to Wall Street. About 12 people were arrested. Several of them are my friends. They stood up for their rights. And then the New York State court, the Supreme Court of New York, stated that their call or their claim for necessary defense, which is I had to do this thing that you think is illegal out of self-defense because global warming is destroying the planet, they actually upheld that. So we have precedent that we can actually use our First Amendment for self-defense and disrupt the system. So I think when people know, like, oh, there's a bill that takes back our banks, and we actually have a precedent within New York State Court, which is like a very difficult place to have the First Amendment be recognized. There's a lot that we can do to hold this out of control corporate machinery accountable. So that kind of strategizing is something that's a good time to share that with willing people who will not get burned out, but will realize, yeah, if we're strategic, we actually can help protect our cities and our towns from GMOs, from oil industries, from fracking industries, and just have to be united.
And I just want to say, to dovetail that, Ted, you were at the forefront of the Occupy Wall Street when it happened in New York. You're at the forefront of the Flood Wall Street. You're now involved with several different indigenous initiatives, which are very important, holding up trees that are 100 years old. And what you said and ended on was we have to unite. And this is why I keep saying there's no presidential candidate that's going to win and go in there, Trump or these guys, and they're going to fix the system. It's just impossible for one person to do. We have to collectively come together. And I'm going to keep drilling that home all the way till next year, to the elections, because not one person can fix the system. It's impossible. Joe Lieberman, this guy, Trump, it doesn't matter who you are. You don't know everything. And that's why an entire team has to come together to introduce a new system that works for the people, because this system is rigged and it's old and it's not working. And I think every American can agree to that in every aspect of our life: food, water, power. I mean, everything is just out of control. Education. So thank you so much for doing all your service, Ted, and always being involved and being an advocate for peace and liberty. And we'll continue to have you on the show. We're going to have you on the show again on Friday to talk about the event again, really drive it home, and also get some more updates from you and some more initiatives. So thank you so much. Again, contact Edward Twitchell Hall III, Ted, on Facebook or Twitter, or contact me. Ted, thank you so much. We'll speak with you on Friday.
Yeah, Jonathan, thank you.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. Right back after these messages.
Even the Declaration of Independence was made on hemp paper. Thomas Jefferson at hemp fields. Let me tell you what the things organically grown hemp yields. Jack Herring tried to tell us the news. The greatest form of control is where you think you're free when you're being fundamentally manipulated and dictated. One form of dictatorship is being in a prison cell and you can see the bars and touch it. The other one is sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bar, you think you're free. What the human race is suffering from is mass hypnosis. We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Welcome back to the show. You're listening to Starseed Radio. Thank you, guests, for coming on, Ted and Ryan, for the daily download. Check out starseedradio.com for the latest news and updates. We're always posting up news articles and stuff 24/7, especially Ryan. He's always posting up articles. And now we're going to jump into our featured guest of the show. He's been on the show before, but it's been a few years, so we're happy to have him back. We have Andy Hoffman, better known as Ranting Andy, talking about precious metals, the markets, what's happening. He's from milesfranklin.com. Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. How have you been?
Good. Well, actually, no one calls me Ranting Andy anymore, but it's a pleasure to be back on the show, and especially because you're airing in Denver, where I live.
Excellent. That's right. 90.7 FM. Shout out to Truth Frequency. So, Andy, if you would, I always like to give a little background and history on the markets, on metals. If you can give us a little history, when was the stock market really put into play? When did the markets itself, currency markets, come together? And then let's talk about the just amazing markets, ups and downs this week.
Well, I mean, if you look at the bigger picture, we went off the gold standard in 1971, and that was the equivalent of giving America and the rest of the world a credit card with no balance on it. Around the turn of the century, when you had the tech wreck, that was kind of when you had the peak in all that debt and the ability of that debt to create jobs and prosperity. And starting from that time, you basically had years and years of the Federal Reserve and other central banks trying to support a dying Ponzi scheme with quantitative easing and lowering interest rates. And first we had the tech wreck, and then we hit what's called peak debt in 2008, when it got to the point where whatever they did was going to make things worse. And since that time, around the world, we've watched commodities crash, currencies crash, economies in real terms crash. And here we are 7 years after the great financial crisis, with the world in worse financial shape than it's ever been by many multiples, and central banks that have used up all of their ammunition. The ammunition they used, zero interest rates and QE around the world, all it did was inflate financial assets and create financial and economic bubbles, which are all unwinding now. And as I said, there's no end game. There's no more credibility of central banks, and there's no more, cash in the kitty for them to use. So I think we're in the midst of an historic crash right here, which started this month, and I expect it's going to go on for quite some time.
Now, what is the place for metals? Are precious metals a safe bet in this time of extreme market volatility?
Well, just from an economic standpoint, forget markets. We're at the point where I expect, most of the small miners have already gone bankrupt and the explorers. So, we've reached peak production because there's been no discoveries for years. The price has been suppressed so long that all the companies are going bankrupt. I expect by the end of this year, meaning we're already in August, we're going to start to see some major bankruptcies and consolidations as the prices have been held by what I call the cartel, the same people that support the stock and bond markets, below the cost of production for so long. So in my mind, supply has already peaked, and it may not come back for decades. And as for the inventories above ground, they're almost gone too, particularly in silver. Miles.com, Franklin.com, we're a precious metal bullion dealer, and we've been around for 26 years. We're having severe shortages now of silver. And with prices this low, they're only going to get worse, just like in 2008 when we completely ran out. And so when the price on your screen said $10, the real price was closer to $20, and you couldn't even buy it. They've always been the safe haven because they're real money when all these fiat currencies collapse, and the average currency around the world is now down, believe it or not, 90% in the last 4 years, and they're still falling. They will maintain the purchasing power. And the only reason you look on your screen to see the price is down in paper terms, because for the same reason the stock market is supported, these canaries in the coal mine are held down. This is something I've been writing about and, proving for years. So again, you're at the point where demand in the world for precious metals is unequivocally at an all-time high. Supply is peaked and is falling and will continue to fall. And the impetus for people to keep buying, continues. I mean, right now we're experiencing the strongest demand we've had in many, many years of people buying precious metals.
What do people a lot have to say about Russia and China? Andy, what do you hear on your side of buying up all the gold and possibly launching a new currency? They got the BRICS Bank that they launched. What are your thoughts on China and Russia and their metals industry?
Well, again, Russia, let's back up. There's a lot of, quote, conspiracy theory out there. A lot of people want to believe, and it's not all conspiracy like who shot Kennedy, but a lot of people believe that there are all these complex discussions going on behind the scenes between bankers and politicians of how to rule the world and create new currencies. These guys, they've all benefited from the paper currency regime, but separately. Americans benefited, French benefited from it, Chinese benefited from it, emerging markets, they all benefited from it. Now it's all falling apart, and they're all scrambling to save themselves. That's why you have this what's called currency war going on. I hear about all the time. That's why when China, they're all trying to devalue their currencies to gain whatever market share they can get of a declining global GDP pie. That's why when China devalues last week, which, by the way, I called in advance, in fact, I predicted it that morning, that what they're doing is basically saying, screw the whole world. We want whatever's left of it for ourselves. So, when you talk about, currencies, there's no scheme to do anything other than survive, to kick the can. That's what politicians and bankers want to do. They want to survive, get reelected, and in the bankers' case, profit. But what they're doing, in kind of, quote, colluding to print money because it's in all their best interests and support markets, they've created these historic financial bubbles, historic economic bubbles, which are equally dangerous. For instance, all the massive oversupply of oil that's been caused by the cheap financing of low-cost shale. And now that prices have collapsed and all these companies have $500 billion of junk bonds financing them, they'll go under just like all the subprime lenders did. So again, you had the final call it is bursting now, and this time around, there's going to be nothing that's going to save the day. There's going to be no new currency. There's going to be no collusion. I mean, yeah, if the markets crashed today, sure, you could have a meeting on the weekend between the ECB and the Fed and the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan to try to save things. But that's not really colluding. That's just trying to kick the can another day. In the big picture, everyone is going down. And the U.S., unfortunately, which has been living more above its its means than anyone because of its reserve currency status has the most to fall.
Now, we saw and covered a story yesterday where Greeks had launched a new bartering system, and we see other systems like this launching, around the planet. We have like the Bitcoin that popped up. How do you see systems like that playing into place? Do you think a collapse will come and we won't have those types of systems in place? And what are your thoughts on like the Bitcoin, on those type of currencies?
Well, a lot of this is just media sensationalism, and a lot of it is grasping at straws. I mean, Greece is, as I have said for some time, they are fully collapsing. There will be no ashes left when they default on their debt and go into hyperinflation. And the last thing that they have any ability or means to do is create alternative networks to financing. If they are bartering, it's because they don't have any money. And as for Bitcoin, give me a break. They can't even master the art of paying back euros, let alone to figure out this complex system. And what do I think of Bitcoin? I think nothing of it. Yes, there's some technology that is interesting, but it's not going to replace real money. I mean, to me, it has less value as money than even dollars do, which is, if you know how I think, it's not saying much. No, the Greeks are gone. Many others will follow it. And it's going to be a very, very difficult time as currencies around the world continue to their value. There's going to be social, there's going to be geopolitical and political revolutions. In fact, you'll probably see one in Greece this year, and there'll be some difficult times. That's why you own physical gold and silver.
Now, we also see, like you just
Bitcoin
mentioned...
Bitcoin just came around 3 years ago, and it's all but collapsed. Gold and silver have been around 5,000 years.
That's right. And you see, just like you mentioned, countries like Venezuela and other ones that are going down in terms of currency. The food is, being hyperinflated right now. Prices are skyrocketing. What are the main reasons? Why are all currencies around the world being devalued? What is the driving engine? Is it just debt? Is it something else in terms of the elites or bankers pulling the strings to make it collapse? What do you think about that? The world currencies.
No, there's no elites. There's no elites and bankers doing anything. It is the debt. The debt is the symptom, though. The disease is the fiat currency, and alongside it, the manipulation of financial markets, which includes central banks setting interest rates at zero. Let alone when they're now buying stocks, and of course behind the scenes they're suppressing gold and. They're in everything. They try to get oil to go up if they need it, and then sometimes they try to get it to go down. All of this financial engineering and money printing is the disease. Debt is the symptom, and that debt that no one can pay back is why everything is falling apart. Now, bigger countries like the United States that have more powerful printing presses, meaning as the reserve currency that the world ceded it back 50 years ago, or let's call it 40 years ago, we have the ability to print more without our currency falling apart because it's still used more than most, and it's still held as reserves more than most. So, it doesn't lose its value the most. But the smaller, the weaker links have completely fallen apart. They don't have the ability to print money without destroying their own currencies. And when we print money, they need to print money too. That's this currency war. So they destroy themselves. Then, of course, you have the fact that, the giant pink elephant in the room is, what's the biggest business in the entire world? It's the sale of commodities, particularly crude oil. And now that you have an historic collapse in commodities, and right now the CRB commodity index, it's not only way below the lows of 2008, if people can remember 2008, how bad things were, but we're approaching 40-year lows. We're almost there now. 40-year lows. That's with all the money printing, with all the low-hanging fruit in the commodity sectors, with low costs having been mined and produced, all gone. That's how bad things are. There's so much oversupply. And this is in a world where demand is collapsing because of this global recession, which is only barely getting started. I mean, how do you think the last month alone is going to impact the global economy of collapsing stock markets and commodities and currencies? So, that's what you're seeing now. All of the weak links fall apart. The big currencies, the dollar, the yen, the euro, against each other, they're just kind of floundering around. They're worthless, and it doesn't matter. But all the other ones against each other, against the big currencies, are collapsing, and eventually the big currencies will collapse too against items of real value, which is why it's so important to them to try to hold down the price of real money, i.e., gold and silver.
You touched on something I want to bring up as well about the lows on crude oil, and I've been reading articles. How come gas prices aren't going down if we're at such a low?
That is a very good question. And given that I spent 10 years on Wall Street as an energy analyst, I have a few insights onto it. Again, I did oil field services like Schlumberger and the drillers. I didn't actually cover the oil price. But I worked at Solomon Smith Barney. I sat with the top oil guys in the country, who, by the way, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, all of them, the consensus view as late as 2005 was that the long-term oil price would be $15 to $20 a barrel. That's how much these guys know. But I would constantly ask them, how come the gasoline price doesn't always move on a one-to-one basis? Sometimes it does, and other times it doesn't. And, their answers vary. They'll say, well, it's seasonal. There's refinery runs. There's the driving season. There's the winter. There's that. There's all kinds of corporate decisions about, where they want to profit on, versus, because you have your upstream and your downstream, meaning the refining and processing is downstream and the exploration production is upstream. But generally speaking, they should move together, when you have any kind of time sample. And as you ask, right now, the most incredible thing I've ever seen. We have seen oil prices go from $63 to $38 as I speak, and the price of gasoline here in Denver hasn't moved one penny. And I even saw someone put out a chart saying that we're seeing all-time high driving demand during this driving season, which makes no sense at all given what the economy looks like right now. I would believe it if you told me that airline miles were plummeting, meaning people just are driving now because they can't afford to fly. I haven't seen that. Maybe new data will show that. But either way, something is very, very fishy about that. Because, and remember, for an oil company, they don't make any more or less money if the gasoline price is high. Because if the gasoline price is high, they make money in downstream, but they lose money in upstream. So again, it's a fantastic question. I constantly am looking into it. I don't know, but I'll tell you the one thing that's not surprising to me. It's that the economy is collapsing, oil companies are collapsing, and we too, as the consumer, get the worst of it.
A funny article I read, not to say funny, but I know when Greece was just going through this bank run they had about a month or two ago, Andy, I'm sure you remember that.
It's just started, but go on.
Yeah, when they shut down the banks, people immediately started to buy PlayStation 4s and run up their credit cards, and they bought electronics, and they sold I don't know how many more, millions of units and stuff like that. I see America like that. When people are depressed and people are, down, they just spend. They spend, and we saw that in Greece. They bought all these electronics. They literally, stores were out of electronics when, as soon as the banks, people couldn't pull out paper money, they went to their credit cards and bought electronics, I guess figuring that they can sell that. Do you see a similar trend going to be happening here when things really start hitting the fan?
Well, I'm actually surprised that people in Greece's credit cards were honored because the banks can't pay on them and the people don't have any money. I'm really surprised that people still have credit cards there for the most part. But it's a different disease. Over there, they were doing it because they're expecting hyperinflation. They're expecting that there's going to be a cataclysm, that the government's going to be overthrown, that they're going to get out of the euro, and all these things are going to happen. And as a result, it's the equivalent of looting. They don't actually expect to pay for it in all of the chaos. And probably they're right. The law will not allow that, but the fact is there probably will be some chaos there. And when you change over to a new currency and the companies and banks are going bankrupt, that's what I would do. It's the equivalent of looting. But in the United States, well, first of all, I would say it's changing. It's been a culture over the years of the dollar being propped up as the reserve currency by all these other countries that want to have weak currencies, that have given us this false sense of security that we can just borrow and borrow and borrow and spend. Not to mention, again, the Fed lowering rates to zero and the PPT, that's the government plunge protection team, constantly in there every day supporting stocks to try to build this, quote, wealth effect, which promotes, profligate spending and subprime lending and all kinds of things. That's what's been going on in America. The thing is, in America, while that culture is still there, people don't have any money. That's why they have more money than in Greece, of course, but that's why retail sales in pretty much every piece of economic data has been plummeting. All of it. Retail sales has been the worst of all of them. 2013 was our worst Christmas season since 2008, and 2014 was much worse. And I can't even imagine how bad this one will be. So, yes, people have less money here. They still borrow. The savings rate isn't going anywhere because whenever people do make money, they're using it to pay off bills now. But I don't think we're going to be in that chaos state in America for a while, because the dollar as the reserve currency will be the last to go. I mean, all the Greek drachmas and all these countries will be long dead when the dollar finally goes. But sure enough, it will. It'll lose its purchasing power, and people will be, start to make irrational decisions based on what they think the government will look like and what the dollar will look like.
And we just covered a story today earlier in the show about the former UK government advisor. He put out some tweets the last 24 hours to stock up on food and supplies to survive the market crash and ensuing social chaos. What are your thoughts on that, the former high-level UK advisor putting out tweets like that warning people in the UK?
Well, I'll tell you, the one thing is that Twitter makes me disgusted. I think it's the bane of society. And, that's another story. But, using it for these means is even worse. But, I agree. I mean, it's funny he's talking about it. Is he talking about it for the UK? Because, the UK will certainly have those issues long before the United States will. But, of course, I tell everyone to, quote, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. We are going to have a dramatically worse economic and financial market condition here than we did in 2008. At a time where we have much more debt and, the central banks can't do anything about it. So, yeah, you want to be ready. I mean, who knows what will happen? Maybe there will be some chaos along the way, so why not stock up on stuff? It's not like you can't eat it anyway. I agree with him 100%.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, his tweet was, the advice for the looming crash: number one, get hard cash in a safe place now. Don't assume banks and cash points will be open or bank cards will work. He's basically just putting out advice like that. Find a rally point for your loved one. So you would think people like this would have some sort of insight, obviously, being one of the top UK people. So it's very interesting to see people like that even putting out tweets, and it's something to pay attention to. When you talk about the fiat currency, Andy, a lot of listeners may not know what a fiat currency is. Can you just explain what a fiat currency is, backed by derivatives, which are backed by basically nothing, and go into what is a fiat currency for listeners that don't know?
Right. Well, anyone who's under 90 years old only knows what a fiat currency is. That's every currency right now. It's unbacked by anything. We last had a gold standard in 1933 in the States. We had a semi-gold standard until 1971, meaning not for the people who were not allowed to own gold at that time, but for the governments as far as settling accounts. But you even had a currency that was backed by anything since 1933. Go to a coin store or look online and look what a dollar looked like. It's still green and white, and it says on it, pay to the bearer, X ounces of gold or silver. All fiat just means decree. So basically the current dollar is money because the government says it's money. It's not backed by anything. It's backed by, quote, the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, which is an historic amount of debt, which is exploding higher by the day, and they're just printing money to pay it off and monetizing it with the Federal Reserve. So that's your full faith and credit, let alone the full faith and credit regarding all the other things it tells you that it's been lying about. That we find out weapons of mass destruction, you name it. So that's what a fiat currency is, and the problem is that fiat currency defines a Ponzi scheme. It's something that it's not inherently backed by anything, and it must grow larger to survive, and it must grow larger while people maintain confidence in it. Which is why they manipulate markets so much, why they need to keep interest rates at zero and support the stock market and hold gold down and do all kinds of things to try to make it look like the powers that be, meaning the central bank and the politicians, know what they're doing. But of course they don't, because look what they've said was going to happen and look what's happened. Just look at between 2008 and 2015. Remember Henry Paulson went in front of Congress, we need TARP or else the world's going to fall apart. That was $700 billion. The Fed has since printed $4 trillion. And that's just what they've told you. That's not the stuff they've done off the balance sheet. And what has it done? We're in far worse condition than we were back then. So, yeah, fiat currencies, Ponzi schemes, everyone in history has failed. Everyone, including 3 here in this country already. And this one is now the first one that's global, where every country is entangled in it. And that's why you're seeing currencies collapse everywhere and all this global unrest, and there's not a single country that's not in a recession right now.
Let me ask you before we go, we got a couple minutes left, Andy. What do you think about the IMF possibly issuing a new form of global currency in the near future? And that was stated by people in the IMF.
Right, it's just more propaganda. I mean, who are the IMF? They are the biggest failures in the history of failuredom. I mean, they are part of the Greek troika that keeps giving them bailouts. They are part of the system. I mean, they're run by the central banks. I mean, it's like saying, what do you think of the Fed and the ECB and the Bank of Japan? That's all they are. I mean, there's going to be no new. The currency they're talking about is something called the SDR, the not strategic, some currency basket, which just means a basket of all the same fiat currencies. I mean, it's almost like a joke because A, they have no credibility, and B, these currencies have no credibility, and the people that print them have no credibility. So why would anyone think that they're going to administer a currency, or that anyone would listen to them? I mean, if you're a Greek, for instance, and your euros have collapsed, let alone your drachma, why would you want to talk to the ECB and say, "Oh, you're issuing a new currency with the same things that destroyed us? For sure, we'll take it on." No, it's just more. That's the high-level conspiracy theory stuff that everyone loves. They want to believe because people want to make order out of something. They want to believe that someone is in control. For instance, they want to believe that, maybe the United States, the Fed, they don't know what they're doing, but those Chinese, they're so smart, they know what they're doing. They've got thousands of years of history, the art of war. They think long-term. No, they are a bunch of morons, communist morons, a handful of them running a country of 1.5 billion people who have destroyed their nation as thoroughly as our banks and politicians have destroyed their own. So, no, there's no collusion. There's no new currencies coming. The new currencies will come after everything collapses by necessity, not by fiat or decree of a bunch of bureaucrats in Brussels or Washington or something.
Excellent. Andy, thank you so much for your honest and ranting Andy information, because really you're like me. We like to get to the facts. This is not fear-mongering. These are facts. These are things that are going to happen. We have about 2 minutes left. What are some pointers that you can give to people and listeners out there over the next 6 months? What can people do? What do you suggest people could do for their families to sort of get through this time of transition?
Well, again, we just talked about things like food preparation, but again, my area of expertise is finance, and I work for a bullion dealer, and I have my net worth in precious metals, physical precious metals, not mining stocks, not ETFs, not closed-end funds. Give us a call, 800-822-8080. I mean, we've been around 26 years without a single registered complaint. We'll talk to you and just answer your questions from a financial standpoint. You got prices being pushed down below the cost of production. We're running out of silver supply. This is exactly what happened in 2008. Just give us a call, that's all.
Excellent. And the website, again, is milesfranklin.com, correct?
Yeah, and remember, I write every day for free. So just go there, sign up, or just go online and read it. I write and I do podcasts every day for free.
Excellent. Andy Hoffman, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to have to do a follow-up in a month or so and have you back on. So thank you again for coming on.
And there are powers that be that let the people panic. Look at the Gulf of Japan. Could they have really planned it? Heading for the iceberg like the Titanic.
Atlantic mystery. Atlantis white from history. The truth about the pyramids in ancient Mayan prophecy.
Space Odyssey. Look into the anomalies and you will find suppression.
Speech because you have nothing to say. That quote, our good friend and our boy, Edward Snowden. Love that guy. Again, arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. With that, we're going to get started with the Daily Download. We're joined by Ryan Matthew Durnick from Bell.com. Good morning, Ryan. How are you today?
Very well, Jonah. How you doing?
Doing good. It's hump day, midweek, lots of things happening, lots of news to cover. So let's go into the Daily Download. What is happening on Mother Gaia today?
On Mother Gaia, in regards to solar activity, behemoth sunspot AR2403 started to decay yesterday, but it's still dangerous and active region. The sunspot has delta-class magnetic fields and harboring energy for strong solar flares. NOAA forecasters are estimating a 60% chance of an N-class flare and a 10% chance of X flares. In other news, there was an earthquake yesterday in the type of magnitude, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because you got to think about the New Madrid seismic zone there, and the fact that this either it was related to a fracking operation, or B, it could be a foreshock to a larger event. So it was felt throughout much of the area of western Tennessee and parts of Arkansas. And in regards to other seismic activity, notable seismic activity, well, I'll just cover the 5.0 or greater. There was a 5.7, 115 kilometers southeast of Escol Island in South Georgia, the island South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. And by about, I'd say on Sunday, it's going to be in the central Bahamas. And then by Monday, it shows it as a Category 1 hurricane. They forward it anywhere from 95 mile-an-hour winds, and it would be coming ashore, it looks like, between West Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale. Again, this is still subject to change.
That's right where I'm supposed to fly home this weekend, Ryan. Maybe I shouldn't leave Costa Rica and go to Florida. What do you think?
Not yet. But in regards, well, it's still we have to keep watch on this. And then in the Pacific, there is a possibility that they've had some near misses throughout the summer. In Hawaii, Tropical Storm Ignacio is really increasing in intensity quickly. It has winds at 55 miles an hour. It's moving west at about 15 to 20 miles an hour. And the possibility is that now the Big Island of Hawaii is in the cone on Monday. So that possibility is there that it may affect the islands directly. Indirectly, if it doesn't hit the islands, there's going to be a lot of large surf, especially on the east-facing coastline of the Big Island. In regards to other news, we have resources falling short in regards to the wildfires currently going on in Washington state, and the wildfire has now grown to a historic monster. There's possibility it forms into a firestorm, basically, and there's about 150 firefighters from Pennsylvania that are transported over there battling the fire, and it's basically the number one priority right now is to quell this fire, which has only been 15% contained since August 15th. So in just 10 days, it's already cost nearly $10 million to battle this firefighter, according to the...
Welcome. We are broadcasting live from the mothership. You are tuned in and listening to Starseed Energy Radio with your host, Jonah Bolt. Starseed Energy Radio, where you can always tune in to hear the colors and see the music. Starseed Energy Radio goes live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, what is up, Spaceship Earth? Thanks for tuning in. You are now receiving a live transmission from Starseed Radio, where you can always tune in to hear the colors and see the music. I'm your host, Jonah Bolt, the Octurian Starseed. Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2015. We have an awesome show lined up for you today. We have 3 guests. Ryan Matthew Durnick with the Daily Download. Then we're going to be joined by Edward Twitchell Hall III. And then our main featured guest will be Andy Hoffman, Ranting Andy from the MilesFranklin.com, a gold and precious metals specialist. Andy's been on the show before. We're going to talk about the craziness that's happening this week in the markets and all over the world. And Andy is the best person I could have think of to bring on to explain what is happening and what it means. So that will be on the second half of the show. With that, we're going to get started with our daily quote. It goes like this: arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free
fire commanders in the area. And I've talked to people out in the western states, and they said that there's ash falling in Idaho. That's how intense these fires are in Washington state right now.
That's pretty far away.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. As we saw yesterday, on Monday, the stock market had a lot of volatility. Initially, it was down 1,000 points, rebounded a little bit, and had losses of about 535 points on the Dow Jones. Yesterday, it was up 300 points, then closed about 200 points down for the day, and now it's up 300 points. So it's a possibility it could go down, but there's also the likelihood that it will go into positive territory today and have some gains, slight gains, because of the interest rates being lowered in China, and that should show.
You mean they'll fix the numbers?
They'll fix the numbers.
I saw another article I want to mention to you. I don't know if you saw this, but the former UK government advisor put out some tweets over the last couple of days. Stock up on food and supplies to survive the market crash and ensuing social chaos.
I did see that.
Article.
He said Yeah, he said to stock up on a couple of weeks of supplies, at the very most a month for you and your family and loved ones. And in regards to other news, Nepal has opened Everest to climbers for the first time since the earthquake in April. So this is good news in regards to tourism and such, because that's a big tourist boon for that area. And as we've been noting and covering over the last couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, you had the explosion in Tianjin, where over 100 people died in that disaster, and now there's fears of mass poisoning from sodium cyanide in the air. And aside from that, there was only a 5.0 magnitude earthquake north of Ascension Island, and then a 5.3 magnitude earthquake.
Ascension Island, I like that. Ascension Island.
Yes, and that's what we all try to do, is ascend to a higher plane of consciousness. 5.3 magnitude was 29 kilometers east-southeast of Takanabe, Japan. And on to other news, as we were following earlier over the weekend and preceding last weekend, the tensions have relaxed in regards to North Korea and South Korea. North Korea has apologized for the provocations, and South Korea has conceded and said it will no longer push out any North Korea anti-propagandas and information. And on to tropical weather. We have a lot going on. Tropical storm Erica.
Oh, I think Ryan cut out for a minute. Ryan, are you with us? All right, we'll jump into some...
I'm sorry.
There we go.
There we go. I cut out for a second. There's a thunderstorm in the area. At 11 a.m., advisory on tropical storm Erica. It has it positioned at about 16.1 north, 57.6 west. Movement is west currently at about 17 miles an hour, so it's a pretty good clip. And the pressure is down to 1,005 millibars. Computer models have it moving north through the northern Leeward Islands as tropical storm watches. Probably warnings will be issued later today as it's moving at a pretty good clip. And then it's moving along the northern coast of Puerto Rico, the north coast of Dominican Republic, and then by Friday, and then by